Hey, welcome back to Invisible Machines, a podcast produced in partnership with UX Magazine and OneReach AI, Artificial General Intelligence. It's a term that's been around for a while, and I think for a lot of people, it probably conjures up images of maybe the Terminator movies, of Skynet, of this idea that machines will suddenly become self-aware or realize they're more intelligent than humans, and then discover that humans are standing in the way of peak efficiency, perhaps, and figure out ways to get rid of us. Or maybe a slightly more benign version of that, they just become more useful and intelligent to people, and suddenly we have nothing left to do. But more recently, the idea of AGI is being discussed in a business context. I think if you head to OpenAI's website, you'll see the acronym AGI above the fold, I believe. And at OneReach AI, we've been talking a lot about organizational AGI. This idea that a company could have its own artificial general intelligence, a technology ecosystem really, that is plugged into all the data they've been accumulating over the years. It understands their processes. It knows a lot about their employees and their customers, and can provide all sorts of personalized automations on both sides, to both employees and customers, and can really take organizations kind of to that next level. So we were really excited to have a chance to speak with Ben Goertzel, who helped popularize the term artificial general intelligence. Ben is the CEO of singularity.net. He is the chairman of the OpenCog Foundation, and he is the former chief scientist of Hanson Robotics. You've probably seen their robot Sophia with its very human-like face doing some very human-like things. But Ben has been working really diligently for many years to try and create a future where when singularity happens or when AGI manifests, it won't just be sitting on one company's server. It won't be owned by a single company or a single entity. In Ben's vision, AGI is spread across computing systems globally, which makes it more likely that these systems will be used for the greater good of humanity, let's say, and not just to make one company a big pile of money. So this interview is really fascinating. It was recorded back in March, so we actually don't really get into the idea of organizational AGI, but it is just a fascinating discussion about conversational AI, artificial general intelligence, and where we might be headed with all this technology over the next 5 to 10 years. So enjoy this one. Let's get into this conversation with the amazing Ben Goertzel. Ben, one thing that occurred to us, with ChatGPT and generative AI taking everyone by surprise, even people who kind of work in associated industries or with that technology or around that technology, it really accelerated everything and also revealed like how small of a window we might have to kind of make sure that we set AI on a responsible course. And I know that it sounds like you've been planning ways that blockchain might kind of help keep us in that safe zone. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to set expectations, I don't think there's much possibility of keeping us in a safe zone. That's not the sort of path that humanity is charting forward. But I'm not sure it ever has been since the dawn of agriculture and civilization and so forth. We have this psychological property where we find this safe zone boring. So after we occupy there a little while, we do something else crazy just for the heck of it.
Yeah,
right?
We invade somebody or somebody invades us.
Yeah, I think it's certainly true. The choice of OpenAI and Microsoft to release ChatGPT as they did has had a big effect on how people are thinking about AI, both in terms of narrow AI applications and in terms of the path forward to AGI.
Yeah.
I mean, the capability of ChatGPT didn't surprise me tremendously because I'd been familiar with Google Lambda, which is probably more powerful than ChatGPT. and also familiar with why Google chose not to release it, basically because it hallucinates and comes up with nonsense.
Yeah.
And there was a business decision by OpenAI just to launch it anyway, which is indeed a form of openness. I mean, their code isn't open and their model isn't open, but they did open their thing up to the world to use. And I mean, I think that's a choice that will advance things faster than keeping it secret, right? I mean, the tendency to hallucinate and sort of bloviate and make things up in the current version, it's a limitation to rolling out practical applications, but it's a limitation a lot of entrepreneurs and scientists are now figuring out ways to work around, right? And on the other hand, just seeing this software program doing so many things that people didn't necessarily think a machine would ever do, or at least not in their lifetime or the next 2 years. I mean, I think this has woken people up to the possibility that real thinking machines may come soon. And of course, more people being woken up to that possibility can actually help accelerate it by making more bright young people want to work on building AGI, making more, investors and companies and governments want to put funding into AGI, right? So I think there's an acceleration effect that will come from the release of ChatGPT, even though it has a lot of flaws and is not in itself, I think, a viable direction for AGI. There's huge sort of side effects of that release. And yeah, as you know, one of the effects is a lot more people are now thinking about, well, wait a minute. What are the implications if technology a little bit beyond this takes over 80% of human jobs? And B, could we really be 3 or 5 or 7 years from machines that can really think like people? And if so, I mean, how do we manage that? What does it imply? So more people are thinking along these lines now. I've been thinking along these lines since I was 4 or 5 years old and first encountered AIs in science fiction, and I've been thinking about it, more seriously since the 80s when I did my PhD and started working on AI, right? So
Yeah.
I would say the intensity of sort of excitement on these matters is not really matched by the quality of thinking on these matters. Most of what I see, and is hardly surprising. Like you can look at much simpler issues like a woman's right to abortion, right? Which is, to be fair, not an incredibly simple issue, but it's simpler than superhuman AGI, right? And U.S. is not dealing with that tremendously well, and nor is the world. Or gay marriage as another example. Like you can still be beaten to death for being openly gay in many countries in the world, like most of sub-Saharan Africa or Central Asia, right? So I mean, there's far simpler things we don't yet know how to deal with as a society, and now we're realizing we're going to have to deal with this incredibly bigger, more complex issue, and we're not very well prepared for it, right? And I think that leads to a lot of other issues that are interesting to discuss, right? So what one direction to go in is how can large language models such as GPT-3, ChatGPT, Google Lambda, a whole bunch of others, how can large language models be an accelerator to AGI on a technical level, which we could talk about a bit? And that another question is, what steps could we take to try to maximize the odds that both the rollout of narrow AIs like LLMs and the transition from narrow AI to AGI, what can we do to maximize the odds that these come out in a beneficial way for more people, right? So I mean those are both interesting topics we can dig into.
Yeah. Let me hit you with what I would consider a little sideways question here. As we sort of look at, I mentioned Marshall McLuhan, I think. So he talks a lot about fooling the senses, right? In the early days, he'd listen to his wife on the telephone talking to his sister. And my mom used to meditate with his wife, so I was this like kid that would hang out in his yard. And she'd, who's sleeping with who and what's happening in this town that she'd never been to with people she hadn't met. And he was just, dying to understand why this mattered to her, why she was connecting with this, and spent hours on the phones. I will say it bothered him so much that he decided to spend the rest of his life studying it, right? What is going on here? And to oversimplify, he's like, look, this media fools our senses into thinking that we're having connection or real connection. It fools our brain. So our senses fooling our brain into believing certain things are real or are in a certain way that, that aren't, right? It's like smelling smoke that isn't there, or seeing fire that isn't there. And then our brain acts as if fire is really there. And I look at machines as like, great. So we're now seeing these machines fooling our senses into thinking we're actually talking to a person. How important do you think it is that we interact with machines in the same way we interact with other humans? As we look at AGI, in my world, it's just machines getting smarter. Like a skill saw that can tell the difference between a finger and a piece of wood, right, is going to be better. But it doesn't need to be anthropomorphic. It doesn't need to talk to me to be useful, right? How important do you think it is that these machines mimic human interaction as we interact with them versus just be what they are, which is machines?
So that's a subtle question. I mean, I would push back a bit on your contention that tools for building stuff wouldn't have a value for a natural language interface. I mean, I think they really would. I mean, I think if you're cutting something with a saw and you can tell the saw like this is soft wood, like go easy on it, don't make the edges too rough, then that would help. It would help an awful lot of people actually. And you could come up with a lot better examples than this one I just came up with. Like you're just screwing a hole in the wall. Screwing a hole in the wall to hang up a picture. You're like, well, we're renting this house. Let's make the hole really small. We're gonna have to page over this afterwards, right? And so, if you're an expert at carpentry, you don't need that. I mean, just take a Roomba vacuum cleaner, right? I would love to be able to tell the Roomba, like, ignore that corner of the room where the kids built something with blocks.
Yes.
Just stay away from there today. Vacuum it the next day, right? Now, you could go on the Roomba's map and try to figure that out now, but you're not going to bother. Instead, I'll just put a physical obstacle there around the Legos because it understand. No, it's certainly true. I don't need the Roomba to say, "Hey Ben, how's it hanging?" every time I walk in.
Exactly. Yeah.
Room. On the other hand, if you have like live-in help or something, you quickly get in the rhythm where they don't say, "Hey, how's it going?" every time they walk in and out of the room doing their job either, right? So I mean, that's, to me, it's not so much about, do you want machines to have the capability for flexible interaction using the methods that are natural to people? I think you do. What social roles do we want machines to adopt in our lives is a far more complex question, right? And so you exactly. I don't personally want my table saw to carry out random chit-chat with me, or at least I think I don't. Some people might well, if they're feeling lonely while they're doing the construction project. Maybe they do. Maybe they do want to chit-chat with their table saw. I don't know. Wouldn't shock me. So I mean, we're looking now as a concrete project in this area with a company called Awakening Health. It's a joint venture of SingularityNET and Hanson Robotics. We have Grace, who was the more famous Sophia robot's little sister, right? And Grace is being developed as an elder care robot. And I mean, you could use Grace as an elderly person in an elder care facility in a couple ways. I mean, you could use her purely as an Alexa-like utility, like help order lunch, place a call with your kids at home, ask them for a reminder why you're taking this medication or something. On the other hand, what we find in early pilot studies we're doing is many people are bored sitting around in elder care facilities. They're just playing with their phones or watching TV all day, and randomly chatting with a humanoid robot, like standing there by their bedside, is an amusing thing to add to the mix of things they do, and can be more stimulating because they can provide sort of cognitive exercises which have some even documented ability to help roll back Alzheimer's up to a certain level, right? So it seems quite particular in what cases people want an anthropomorphic interaction and don't. Like for tutoring systems for little kids, often the kids want an anthropomorphic interaction. I mean, it makes it less boring than just getting like quick quiz questions or something. But yet in other cases, you totally don't. Fitness is another interesting question, right? Like, do you want your treadmill or your stair climber to talk to you and give you encouragement? Well, some people really do, right? I mean, I'm somewhat an antisocial person. I really don't. I would shut the thing off immediately or hit it with a club if it kept talking to me, right? Because I would rather be pursuing my own thoughts while working out. But other people, totally different, right?
Yeah.
So I think we do need machines, and we do want machines that are anthropomorphic. We don't want ones that are stupidly anthropomorphic and like inject themselves in our lives in annoying ways. I think back to an early version of Microsoft Word. You had Clippy, the little talking paperclip. You also had a little poodle, and that would be at like the bottom corner of the Microsoft Word screen. And the poodle would jump up and down, and I was like, get this fucking poodle and paperclip out of my work. But then when they got rid of the poodle, I remember one of my friends, or the wife of one of my business partners, didn't want to upgrade to the next version of Word because they were getting rid of her poodle. They're like, no, I want these new features. This poodle keeps me company all day while I'm writing. I'll be lonely without, like, can you somehow hack the poodle into the new version of Word? Right? So I mean, that's a sort of it was instructive to me, and I felt that kind of thing in a big way when I started working with David Henson, who's the mastermind behind all these humanoid robots, right? Because I mean, as a mathematician, my angle on AI was more, let's isolate the most abstract, elegant mathematical structures of thinking, and let's try to view human thinking to the extent we can as a special case of more general math structures of thinking. And I really couldn't give a shit about whether the AI can smile like a human being or look you in the eye, right? That's like the least interesting thing to me whatsoever. Then when I saw how ordinary people who aren't hardcore math geeks relate to Sophia, I'm like, oh, all right, well, you've got a point there. Like we did a trial with Sophia as a meditation assistant, leading people through meditation exercises.
Wow.
You know, something like 30% of people were able to get into a deep and blissful trance state through Sophia leading them into meditation exercises. And what you saw in the interviews after the fact is people saying, like, you know, I never was able to get there meditating on my own or with a human meditation guide or a class. The thing is, it's knowing that the robot can connect to me, but she isn't judging me like a person would.
Right.
It had a really profound effect. And we saw different versions of this in elder care. Like many elderly people we interviewed, they wanted the robot to help them go to the toilet, basically, because they're embarrassed having to need a person's help there. But they're not embarrassed with a robot helping them.
We subscribe so much meaning to what people are thinking behind the words,
Yeah, well, that's right.
And you don't do that with robots.
The robot, well, they do. What's interesting is people do ascribe a meaning to what the robot is thinking, and while the robot is leading them through meditation exercise, people feel like the robot is there with them in that moment, and people feel like the elder care robot cares about them, and it's important that it has an emotional inflection to its voice. But yet, so it wasn't that people felt the robot didn't judge me because it is so stupid. They just felt the robot doesn't judge me because it's like a different kind of mind that isn't as annoying and judgmental as people are, right? So we want robots that are anthropomorphic, but in a way don't have all the irritating characteristics that people have, right? And is interesting. I think that will lead to other complex social problems. Like in what cases is a robot boyfriend or girlfriend just preferable to the real thing? Not because it's exactly like a person, but because it gives us a bunch of the goodies we want from a real boyfriend or girlfriend,
right? Without
being needy, clinging, judgmental, and annoying, right? You don't necessarily want it to be everything a person is. You want it to give the goodies a person gives without the bad things a person a person gives. And to what extent that's what people want really remains to be discovered, right? Like I feel like that's not what I want. Like I'm happily married and there's a genuine human connection there, and it feels important that is a connection between two humans with all the frailties and problems that it gives. It feels like in some ways it's a better thing. There's another human who's like the same kind of organism I am, who is loving me and accepting me. On the other hand, I haven't had the experience of the perfectly engineered robo girlfriend yet, right? So I don't know exactly what I'm comparing it to.
Yeah,
so,
I think like
there's going to be a lot of subtle things there, and this does tie in with the other questions you raised about, how do we make the singularity go down in a friendly way, and you get into questions like, okay, who owns and controls these potential spookily and configurably human-like, robot assistants, teachers, partners, girlfriends, nurses, and whatnot? To what extent is their fundamental motivation to help people as opposed to sell people stuff or brainwash people into some, corporate government media advertising order? I mean, there's all these broader issues that you alluded to initially have their instantiations in terms of humanoid robots and anthropomorphic systems, although they also pertain to sort of the overall IoT-based intelligent global brain, which may have many very non-anthropomorphic aspects.
For me, I find it helpful to split purpose into entertainment or productivity, and it's kind of to your point in the case of a caregiver, there's probably parts of both that that matter. It's a weaving between productivity, I think, and you alluded to this or probably just said it outright, which is if a robot's going to ask me how I'm doing, it's unlike us humans who don't really care about the answer, it should care about the answer, and it should change something about how we interact as a result, or don't ask me, right? As a robot, don't ask me how I'm feeling if the answer has no bearing on future interactions, whether I'm sad or happy, isn't going to change what happens next, then you're just
Yeah. I mean, I tend to feel that way. Whether everyone feels that way, I'm actually not sure. I mean, some people may prefer the polite greeting because it makes them feel good. I think in Japan they do, right? So in Japan, in Tokyo, there's like 4 million vending machines in Tokyo. They speak, and I've seen many times sort of Japanese guys bowing politely to the vending machine after it says something. I mean that arigato gozaimasu, right? I mean the ritualized interactions play a different role in that culture, and they even could be offended in many contexts if you act like you're responding to how they're feeling. Like you're not supposed to be doing that. You're just supposed to be doing the ritual interaction. So I mean, but that's Japanese culture, which is unusual to us as Westerners, right? So I think there's a lot of subtlety to fitting AIs into human society and human culture, and then there's the fact that our society and culture will evolve in a different way because these AGIs are there, right? I don't feel like any of these are the worst problems we're going to face
right. No.
during the transition to singularity, but I think there are problems that a post-singularity AGI with triple human intelligence will be able to sort through pretty easily, and there will be glitches in human-robot interaction as we go through the transition to a singularity. I'm more concerned about issues like, okay, a mix of narrow AI and early-stage AGI eliminates a vast majority of human jobs. The developed world gives some form of universal basic income because we don't really want all the streets of every U.S. city to be full of homeless people who were recently put out of a job. Nobody gives universal basic income to the subsistence farmers in the Central African Republic, for example. So you have a world where the rich countries have everyone sitting around watching VR porn and hanging out with their humanoid robots waiting for the singularity, while the means of production are dominated by massive robot factories. And the other couple billion people in the world are subsistence farmers with no modern medical care and no way to earn dollar income in the modern economy. Meanwhile, the kids of these subsistence farmers are trained in the computer science and computer hacking and are very annoyed at the rising inequality on the planet. And I think that military establishments around the world will see that AGI is coming and want to use that for their own particular purposes, which, as we see, are not really humanity-oriented, but are often national sovereignty-oriented, right? I mean, even before AGI comes, like what's going to happen with TSMC? What's the situation going to be in Taiwan in the next 5 years? Introducing AGI into that picture complexifies things considerably. So, I mean, I think there's a potential for a very messy transition in the last few years before a full-on singularity brings us AIs with multiple times human intelligence.
Yeah.
I'm more worried about that than about whether a robot says hello to us, when we would rather it not. And I'm more worried about that than I am about super AGI willing to turn us all into computronium to power its hard drives. Like, I mean, I think that's possible, and we can't know for sure that super AGI won't be malevolent or indifferent to humans. I think the odds are reasonably high that if we sort of raise up the young AGI in a sensible way, doing compassionate things with it, having it be teacher, elder care worker, scientist, artist, rather than having it just be a military bot or an advertising and espionage AI. I mean, I think the odds are fairly high in the end, we could raise up AGIs so that they're reasonably compassionate to people, and there's risk of excessive anthropomorphism that there also. But what I worry about more is the transitional period when the AGI is smart enough to benefit the haves differentially to the have-nots, but not yet smart enough to deliver abundance globally and airdrop, molecular nanoassemblers across the African savanna. Like what we dealt with the pandemic rather badly on a global level. We're not able to deal with things like the current war in Ukraine very well, right? So how are we going to deal with this much more serious, crazy, rapidly changing situation of a transition from narrow AI to AGI, right? I mean that's there's a lot of things that are very hard to foresee, but you can see a lot of like techno thriller novel like situations unfolding in a very complex and unpleasant way.
If I were to kind of look at the optimist side of that, I might say that humans are incredibly adept at inventing new jobs. The cappuccino machine in your house, and that being followed with more baristas than there's ever been in the world.
That example doesn't help sub-Saharan Africa very much.
No, it doesn't. And
actually,
and I
agree.
agree.
I do think that there's a point there in that there are some cases where people just want to interact with other people. Now, I think the barista example will be gone soon. I mean, I think fast food and Starbucks and so on will be automated just because you still got to wait a long time for your coffee, right? And I mean, if you just replace the back end of a Starbucks with a whole robot infrastructure that produces your coffee, it's going to be faster and cheaper, and ultimately that will override the minor pleasure of interacting with a human barista. I mean, I think in a high-end gourmet restaurant, you may still have human waiters or waitresses, just like rich people will still have a butler to greet people at the door, like even if it's not especially useful. So I think the baristas will go away. I mean, I think like a preschool teacher, okay, sure, that there's a value to having a human interact with your little kids and teach them what it is to be human. Psychotherapist, absolutely. I mean, there's a human connection there, which has to be human to human in a certain sense, right? So I mean, I do think there's some interactions that are fundamentally about enriching our ability to be human, and then we're going to get that from interacting with human beings. Whether that has to be done on a monetary payment basis versus on some sort of volunteer interaction basis is a different question. But I don't think that AIs are going to get rid of all human to human interaction, because I think that's not what people want, right? I mean, as an example, I mean, in the band I play in, we have trouble recruiting drummers to join our rehearsals sometime, and you could indeed imagine an AI drummer that would work better than a random human drummer we recruit. I would rather not do that. I would like to have that fallback in case we can't find a drummer. But yeah, I would rather have a human drummer, even if they're not as good, because part of what you're after is just the feeling of playing music as a human with other human musicians and the sort of collective vibe you get into there. And it can be cool to have an AI joining the jam and like contributing its own riffs that are different than what a human would come up with, right? But I mean,
but only if it enhances that connection.
Yeah, you don't want to replace. I mean, the AI drummers in Logic, Logic, the music programmer, Logic Express are pretty good now, actually. And I mean, they will adapt to your rhythm. They'll do fills and stuff. But I mean, in that context, you're not just after optimum functionality, right? You're actually after the experience of being a human interacting with other humans. And that's, I think a barista is an overly weak example of that, because ultimately if your coffee cost half as much and came in 20 seconds instead of 10 minutes, you would quickly bypass the smile you exchange with the barista. But live music is a great example of that, because people will pay to go watch other humans play music, like, even though you could listen to a recording, which probably is more reliable. It's like the best virtuosos in the world playing, right? But you'll pay to go see other humans perform because you like the fact you're in the room with other humans performing, right? So I mean that's, on the other hand, none of that helps. Like, at the outskirts of Addis Ababa now, where I've had an AI development office since 2014, on the outskirts of Addis, you've got this factory where a bunch of Ethiopian guys assemble shoes from parts largely made in China to sell into the African market. That's not going to exist much longer. Like, it's going to soon be cheaper just to robotize the assembly of shoes rather than having Ethiopian people assemble those shoes, right? And I mean, that's not going to be replaced. There's going to be no other factory where Ethiopian people with minimal education assemble stuff. Like, what job will those people do? They'll have to go back to being subsistence farmers. I don't see another job coming for low education, developing world, middle-aged men. I mean, I think going forward, sure, we can use AI tutors to enhance education in the developing world, so the next generation, when they grow up in a decade or two from now, would be able to do computer programming jobs or something, which is the case of a small percentage of that population now. But in my view, we're post-singularity then already. By the time an Ethiopian in kindergarten graduates high school, that's not the most worrisome. It's not the most worrisome time scale, right?
Right.
So, and I think, you've got. I'm a big optimist about the singularity coming out well, actually. So I think we're going to get human level AGIs that are well disposed toward people and solve nanotech, and we'll live in an era of abundance without death or disease, and without having to work for a living, and there'll be all sorts of possibilities we could barely now conceive of. I'm less of an optimist about the, let's say, 2 to 7 year transition period from when an initial AGI breakthrough is made to when you have a full-on singularity. And
Got it.
Ray Kurzweil thinks this transition period will take 16 years. He's forecast 2029 human level AI, 2045 singularity. I think it will be much shorter than that, but I still don't think it'll be like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that transition period will have both very amazingly positive and both very scary and unpleasant aspects on various parts of the planet.
One thing,
unless somehow there's a massive increase in the level of human consciousness between now and then. But that's it. At the moment, it seems AI technology is advancing faster than the compassionate self-awareness of the human species. I mean, if I look at it empirically. Right?
Yeah, that's what I love about the space is that we get to explore technology, but we also get to explore existential questions about humanity, and it's our jobs, and so we don't feel like we're goofing off when we have these discussions. I sort of love that. And one of those areas that we spend a lot of time on is this idea of how we value ourselves as humans, productivity being, something that is fairly recent in terms of how humans value themselves. And as long as we value ourselves...
And very particular to certain segments of the population, I think. It's a bunch of elderly professionals like ourselves who care about that. I mean, I think most teenagers aren't too worried about it, and I see less concern about that in the various other parts of the world than in the U.S. or Western Europe also. So yeah.
So So threatening our self-worth on productivity, maybe the question is, should we value ourselves on our productivity or more our creativity and connection with other people? And does that change the game on the threat a little bit in terms of the interim?
I mean, I think valuing ourselves on productivity is almost done, right? Because once AIs can do practical stuff more efficiently than us, then I mean, it's a non-starter.
Right.
I think for a certain segment of the population that will be psychologically traumatic, but it's a familiar form of trauma. I mean, when people retire, they face that now, right? And I mean, most people get through it, some don't. They're depressed in retirement because they're not, delivering productive stuff as they did during their careers. Many others make the transition to being retired and enjoying life and enjoying their families, and they get over the fact that they miss working, right? So I mean, I think that transition will happen, and I do think, yes, satisfaction in social relationships and in the process of being creative rather than the perceived superior quality of the creative product. I mean, I think these things will continue to be important through a singularity. Like they don't really change that much if you have super AGI that's 10 times
Right.
smarter than people and can build all this stuff that you need.
Yeah, if creativity is a journey, not a destination, then there's less threat of being replaced, right? Because
Yeah, and honestly, for almost all artists and musicians and writers, it is, right? I mean, most people pursue these things not because they think they can make money out of them, nor because they think what they're doing is necessarily the best thing that's ever been created in human history. They create it because they love doing it, right? It's
Right.
just now that's a smaller segment of the population. But I mean, I was in Morocco in the Sahara not long ago in a camp there, and all the staff in the camp, the ones who sweep things up or cook or take care of the camels or whatever, everyone in the evening just got together around the fire playing various African drums into the night just for their own entertainment. It's a cheap thing to do, right? You can sit around the smoke and play drums. And they're pretty much all amazing musicians by Western standards because they just learned polyrhythmic drumming as kids, and they're not recording it. They're not thinking they're going to become stars or something, right? It's really just it's a social and creative thing to do, and I think many non-Western cultures are already there in terms of valuing social relationship and the process of creativity. The issue is, they also want medical care, and I mean they also would like to have food even when there's a drought, right? So I mean I think that the issue we'll face is more the global economy is broken and doesn't have a route to supply what many of us consider basics to the developing world. And the advent of advanced AI and other advanced technologies doesn't automatically fix the global economy in that
Right.
way. Like eventually it does. Like when AGI can 3D print molecular assemblers really cheaply, then okay, you're there, right? Like just like now, there's smartphones throughout Africa because the manufacturer got cheap enough. I mean, you can make a Xiaomi smartphone in China. You can buy it for $20 or something, right? So that these are cheap enough. They're being distributed everywhere. Although sub-Saharan Africa still has some of the most expensive internet bandwidth in the world. So not everything has been solved, but that it takes some time at least in the current pre-singularity regime, it takes some time to go from the first manufacturer to inexpensive manufacturer. But you can also see, in terms of what we're bothering to apply technology like large language models to, you can see a prioritization that's going to increase global inequality and lead to a bunch of mayhem. Like we're focused a lot more on advertising placement than on, say, machine translation for languages without writing. Like we could by now, we could have made a Star Trek translator that would translate every African language speech to speech into English or Chinese, right?
Yeah.
But you have a lot of people speaking languages that have no writing system and who don't speak any language with a writing system. Yeah. We could give them a system to use on feature phones and smartphones that would translate speech to speech,
right,
what they say into English or any other language, which would do amazing things for opening up the global economy to everyone. Now, this will happen. The thing is, it could have been done already if big tech companies chose to prioritize it.
Right.
Instead, we've just chosen to prioritize, making cool images based on prompts. I mean, it's more important to make an image of the Pope riding a zebra on the surface of Jupiter based on a textual prompt than it is to make a translator that will let a few 100 million people living in Africa who don't speak any language with a writing system than it is to let them talk to everyone and join the global economy, right? So I mean, there's a lot of choices being made just through the way industry is structured that have an implication for how these technologies are rolled out as singularity approaches, and then they may have implications for how nasty and bloody the transition to the singularity is. Yeah. And this comes out to, this is a lot of why I did SingularityNET, right? Because I mean, my primary focus as a researcher is how do you get AGI? I think we're going to get there by neural symbolic evolutionary hybrid methods in a way. So deep neural nets will be a part, logical reasoning engines will be a part, evolutionary learning algorithms will be a part. So that the large language model stuff that's happening now is going to accelerate AGI, but it's not the whole thing. It's going to be a piece of sort of multi-algorithm AGI systems. But you can do that without the sort of blockchain-based infrastructure we're developing in Singularity. You could do that on the servers of Microsoft Azure or something, right? The reason it's so important to develop this on a decentralized infrastructure that runs in every country on the planet and that is not owned or controlled by any one party is because once you make the transition to AGI, suddenly every government and every large corporation will try to eat it and control it. Yeah. And what you want it to be rolled out more like the internet or more like Linux, where the AI mind is fragmented and running all over the planet with no one owning or controlling it, so that when at least when the transition to AGI happens, that in itself is happening in a globally distributed way. Like we're talking now to these people in Paraguay who want to use hydroelectric power to make this incredible data center that's like 2 to 3 times as big as the biggest data center in China, 5 or 10 times as big as the biggest individual like Google or Microsoft data center. So if they build this amazing AI data center in Paraguay, and we're then running part of the first AGI mind in Paraguay, while part is in Azerbaijan, part is in Turkmenistan, a bunch is in the US, parts in China, parts in Russia, parts in Ukraine, like parts in Iran, parts are in Ethiopia. So it's running on machines all over the place, connected by the internet, which is a global open system. If that's where the transition to AGI happens, right, then it's not that easy for anyone to suck it up and control it and use it toward their own narrow corporate or sort of tribalistic governmental aims.
Yeah,
that doesn't solve every problem, right? But it places an interesting spin on how the transition to a global superintelligent AGI unfolds.
Yeah, I've been always a huge fan of what you guys are doing, and full alignment, in terms of the concepts. And I think what's great about it is that it's not just philosophically, in my opinion, the right way to go. It also technically, to me, feels like the fastest way to get there. So it's not just that I believe in it from a societal benefit standpoint, but I also believe it from a technologist standpoint as better. If one company or one system tries to invent all the things that are necessary to make this possible, we'll be waiting a lot longer. And
yeah, this is why big tech companies have embraced open source for AI code, right? But then the models they build with this AI code, they keep proprietary.
Right.
But they've seen they need to open source the AI code itself. But I think we need to go a step further and make the actual deployed learning AI minds open, and as well as the source code. But we've already seen that, big companies that hate openness and want to own everything, they had to open up certain things, or they'd just be left behind.
Yeah. It seems like a forced scenario. You mentioned two things I want to roll back to. One is science fiction, which I'm an obvious fan of, and the other was LLMs. And I worked on a film in an earlier life called Galaxy Quest. I don't know if you've ever seen that film, but it's pretty funny. So the premise of it is that a group of aliens have been watching a show that is very similar to Star Trek, and they consumed all of it, believing that it was all truth, not fiction, because they don't have lies in this alien species. And they came down to Earth and found the cast of Star Trek, essentially, and then helped them to come back and save their planet, because apparently that's what they are, as heroes that know how to save everything. And they were able to communicate with humans because they had studied these historical documents, which were really a television show. And then from there they were like, communicating. And I couldn't help but see OpenAI's LLM and imagine that some alien species has consumed all of the data from the internet, and understanding the mathematics behind it, have now landed on our planet and are communicating to us, having consumed all this, and now me seeing that's what that interaction would look like. They may not understand our culture. They may not know what we're talking. But
ChatGPT is really boring, though. I mean, I'd say I hope an alien will have a bit more zing to their communications. Because we've been working on language models trained on, say, my own writing or Philip K. Dick's writing, and in some ways our models don't have the facility or breadth of knowledge of ChatGPT, but they're far more interesting in what they say, and we've been using that to generate lyrics for the Desmond robot who sings in our band and so forth. But so I think, ChatGPT, it's merging together kind of everything on the web up to a certain point, and this is it's sort of lowest common denominatorism, right? And
yeah.
I think what's interesting about and weird about these systems is they achieve a certain generality not through having a powerful ability to generalize, but rather through having such a huge training data set, right? So many of the things that people care about are represented in the training data. Almost anything anyone asks, you can find 100 things in the training data that are similar to that and munge them together and synthesize an answer. It's cool, but it means you're achieving what appears as generality from the human perspective, right, without having much ability to actually make leaps of generalization on its own, right? So if you had a world consisting of chat GPTs, no fundamental progress would ever get made. You'd just be repromuting and recombining stuff.
Right.
And I mean, one lesson, of course, is maybe 90% of human jobs are like that. I mean, you're not inventing anything very different. You are just repromuting and recombining stuff that's been done elsewhere on the planet, right? So that then, I mean, economically, there's not that many economic functions that require true originality. On a culture and species level, we certainly do require that true originality to progress.
Right.
So I mean, that's as an example, if you trained a large language model on all music up to the year 1900, so feed it only music up to 1900, nothing later, then give it a prompt like, let's synthesize West African rhythms with Western chordal church music, right? I mean, it will not invent jazz. It will never invent jazz. It will put Mozart to West African beats instead, right? So I mean, it's not representing things at a level of abstraction such that it can combine things in a way that comprises a big creative leap, right? I mean, it will not invent Kandinsky's paintings either. So that, I mean, there's a lot that humans can do that isn't just sort of facile combination of things that have been done before, and these instances of more radical creativity do play a huge role in driving our culture forward, yet they're a small percent of what almost all humans do
Right.
day by day. I mean, this is why, like, Facebook Galactica was a bomb, because they're trying to use an LLM for science. But I mean, science is one of the few areas of human pursuit where most of the time you really are trying to make a leap beyond everything that was done before, and not just bunch together stuff that was done before.
That's an important point.
I mean, to do science is not the same as writing a cover letter or writing a college admissions essay. I mean, to do science and not just do something that looks like science to a non-scientist, you really do need to do something that is original and leaps beyond what was there before. And I mean, LLMs now cannot do that. Right. So that's it.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
It's baffling that Facebook didn't see that before releasing the thing, though. That's a weird.
Yeah, it is. It's
weird fuck it must have gone through.
Disconnect. Yeah, it's the to me, it's that if the aliens, that the LLM or the being able to suck in the words and predict next words doesn't reveal the intelligence of anyone. It's just a way to communicate. But what you communicate and what intelligence sits behind it, it's why I've always felt that a lot of this is just more like a front end than it is a back end. It's more of an interface in my mind. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, there's a lot we just don't know, right? I mean, I think because we're going to have hybrid type systems where we have things like LLMs, then we inject AGI systems like the kind we're trying to build in OpenCog Hyperon and SingularityNET. We inject AGI systems into the mix with these LLMs, so then you're getting something that's different than an LLM or different than the human-like mind, right? It's a mind that's alien in a more fundamental sense than a bug-eyed monster coming from another planet or something, right? Because it's not a mind that is created to control a physical body moving around in an environment trying to get energy and survive. It's a different sort of mind that crystallizes in this distributed, decentralized network from a combination of these super powerful narrow AI systems with some AGI components, and maybe crystallizes from human brains with their brain implants also, right? So I mean, it's going to be quite different sorts of minds. Science fiction has not done that great a job of exploring the domain of radically non-human minds. I mean, Stanislaw Lem tried in Solaris, but his conclusion was just, well, there's going to be very alien, non-human types of minds that we cannot understand what they are, and that he's just like, well, we'll give up, right? On the other hand, most alien minds in science fiction are, they're aliens in bodies, vaguely like human bodies, that are going around trying to mate and survive and get resources and so on. And that sort of setting for a cognitive system pushes minds to be quite human-like in some ways, right? And so already in the case of like distributed intelligent networks on the internet, crystallizing together out of some embodied, some not so strongly embodied, some narrow, some generally intelligent systems, what kind of mind might crystallize and self-organize out of this? That's a very hard thing to explore and to dramatize, right? I come back to a comment that Michael Rose, the biologist I've been working with on this project, trying to understand why certain fruit flies we have live so long. So we have these flies that live 5 times as long as normal flies, created by 40 years of experimental evolution. We're trying to use machine learning and reasoning to understand their DNA and to understand why they live so long. And what Michael Rose, the biologist who conducted the evolutionary experiment to produce the long-lived flies, keeps saying is like there doesn't need to be a protagonist. There doesn't need to be an antagonist. There doesn't need to be like one gene or one process, which is the most important thing in making these flies live a long time. It could be a complex network of 3,000 things interacting together in some complex nonlinear dynamical pattern that just doesn't fit, the dramatical schema that people want it to. Like not everything is a Hollywood movie, right? And I think just like we run into that bias in trying to understand biological networks, we're trying to cast it into a simple template our mind can understand, like this one gene is making us live a long time, instead of it's these 1,000 genes participating in some complex network, each with a minor role, right? In the same way, I mean, science fiction writers gravitate toward forms of alien intelligence that are ridiculously human-like but differ in a few parameters. Like this super intelligent cat is more aggressive or something, right?
Yeah.
Or this mind is like Spock. He's very, very logical. But actually, the space of minds being explored is really, really, really close to human minds. And already, when you think about an intelligent SingularityNET system sprawled across the internet, you're already in a region of mind space that's tremendously different than most science fiction writers.
Right. It's almost like an aspen tree. You can look at replicating an aspen tree, but you realize that it's part of a system and it's connected to other aspen trees, and then mycelium connects it to other parts of the forest, and so replicating the aspen tree doesn't matter.
We're just not that good at. So we're not good at thinking about those systems, just like we're not good at thinking about systems like ChatGPT with the insane amount of training data that goes into them. Right, like our thinking about intelligent systems is very closely bound to humans and animals, which is what we evolved to think about. And I mean, for this reason, among others, we really are leaping into the unknown and incomprehensible. We're definitely not moving forward into a safe zone. I mean, nonetheless, I'm fairly optimistic. We're going to create post-singularity superminds that are compassionate and friendly and helpful toward people. I recognize, though, my optimism about this is largely just constitutional or intuitive or spiritual or something, because if just like the paranoia of an Elon Musk or Nick Bostrom is probably constitutional and emotional to them, right? I think if you want to look at it from a pure rationalist probability calculating standpoint, mostly what you can say is the confidence interval is very, very wide. Like, I mean, on a pure rational basis, we're moving into domains where we don't have a solid ground of knowledge about what's going to happen. There's no rational reason to assume it's probably going to be bad.
Right.
I'm not sure there's a rational reason to assume it's probably going to be good either.
Right. And it kind of comes down
my
to
optimism is probably guided by the non-rational parts of my human mind. And for some people, that will be reassuring because they don't overvalue the rational as the only component of insight. For some people, that will be disturbing because they think that rationally calculating the odds is the only meaningful thing, right? But I mean, I think that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, and to your point, generalization also falls into here because it may be good for one person and bad for another. You know, to speak generally is difficult. And
well, yeah, but I think if you have an AGI greater than human intelligence that doesn't want to kill people, wants to let people alone mostly to conduct their lives as they wish, maybe intervening if someone tries to nuke a bunch of people, and that, say, airdrops Drexlerian molecular assemblers around the world for whoever wants them, along with chatbot interfaces to a massive superintelligent knowledge base. I mean, if we get that sort of future for humanity, indeed, it's not going to be good for everyone. I mean, a billionaire will be pissed off. They're no longer a lot richer than everybody else. And I mean, people whose thing was feeling superior because they can do more stuff than other people will be left at a loss. So it's not going to be good for everyone, but it's going to be pretty good for the vast majority of people. And if we get that sort of future for humanity, I think I will consider the singularity as having been a big success.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's it.
My son is a jazz musician, so I see the precision in mathematics that go into creating jazz, but then there's also a solo, which is like this extremely vulnerable human moment. It makes me wonder, like, you could imagine, and you've talked about AI playing music or singing, but what kind of relationship do you think that level of intelligence might have with creativity?
Phil, I think narrow AIs like we have now, whether it's large language models or something else, can do a lot of music composition and improvisation, but they will lack the magic that you get from having a human pour their heart into either the structure of a composition or the solo. Because I mean, the mathematics of composition is there, but I mean, it doesn't distinguish Mozart from Salieri, right? I mean, it doesn't tell you why the very simple trumpet line in Bitches Brew by Miles Davis is so evocative, even though it's just like what? That's so simple. I mean, yeah, there's implicit harmony there, but why is that like get at the human soul so much, right? So on the other hand, I think once you made the transition to AGI, I think the AGI will be able to do that even though it's not a human.
Yeah.
I think the AGI will be able to come up with stuff that's profoundly emotionally evocative to people. But I do suspect to do that on more than a sort of one-off accidental basis here and there, you're going to need the transition from narrow AI to AGI. On the other hand, I think even after AGIs can do that, I think people will still be interested in having other people do that, right? I mean, just the knowledge that some human came up with this gives it a different feel. I mean, just like sitting in the audience of a live jazz performance. I mean, seeing the guy there improvising that on the saxophone, it feels different than hearing it on a recording, right? And so, I mean, in the same way, as a human, seeing a human there playing that is going to feel different than seeing a robot playing that or hearing it on the recording.
Yeah, we respect the
You're a
self-discipline
person.
behind it.
You know what that person had to go through to learn to move their fingers that way, right?
Yeah.
And that means something to you, but it does mean you're going to be refocusing on the process and on the human connection there. It's going to be more like that drum circle around the fire in Morocco than it is like the current music industry, which is focused on like, this guy's a star, this guy's a great virtuoso, he's so much better than everyone else, we've got to listen to him. And that doesn't necessarily survive when the AI is better. It can move its fingers 10 times as fast as the fastest human virtuoso. But in the end, that's kind of bullshit anyway, right? And the African drum circle is probably more fundamentally healthy in terms of the human meaning of music.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Ben. We'll let you get to your next call. Really appreciate taking the time.
Thanks for all the fun discussions, and we should do this again in a year or something. We'll see where AI has gotten to.
Yeah, great conversation.
Yeah, we'd love to. Thanks again, Ben. Hey, thanks again for tuning in to Invisible Machines. Don't forget to follow Invisible Machines wherever you get your podcasts so that you can hear new episodes as soon as they drop. You can also watch this podcast on the Invisible Machines YouTube channel. Thank you so much to everyone who listens to this podcast, and especially to those of you who leave comments, because we've received a lot of really useful commentary that has helped us shape this podcast as we move forward with it. Thank you, as always, to our producers, Elias Parker, Kate Timchenko, and our video editor, Michael Litvinov, for making this podcast look and sound wonderful. We look forward to catching up with you again next week, right here on Invisible Machines.